So let's start first with a definition of collaboration so that we're all working off the same definition of what we're talking about. So I'm just going to read to you the definition of collaboration. Collaboration is individuals working together to a common purpose to achieve a business benefit. Collaboration enables individuals to work together to achieve a defined and common purpose. And that can be synchronous or asynchronous. So it can be real time, or it can be, interactions that are delayed and you respond when you can. So if you guys can go now to menti.com, thinking about that definition that I just gave you of collaboration, and type in the code 548834, and I'm going to put that in the chat, menti.com, and the code is 548834. And that's going to give you the opportunity to type words in that you think are challenges that you have with collaboration. What are some challenges that you see with collaboration? All right, effective communication. That is definitely one that's a challenge. What are some other challenges we have? Design by committee, communication. Okay, good. Other challenges. Sharing ideas, perfect. And I believe I have it set up, you can type more than one thing in. So design by committee, effective communication or communication, and sharing ideas. And that's where we find that we're struggling with communication. So during this time that we're together, I'm going to see if I can help you come up with some solutions to those challenges. And if I don't answer your questions or your concerns at the end, remember you can type in a question that you have and I'll answer those at the end as well. So one of the challenges we have with collaboration is communication, but it's also enabling people to feel comfortable enough that they can share their ideas. So whether we believe it or not, we all come into this world with biases. And I gave you an example at the beginning of the biases that I faced as a woman, but there are all kinds of biases that we have established. And it's not that we are waking up every morning and say, well, yes, I don't like people who wear blue shirts, so I'm going to treat all the people who wear blue shirts differently today. We don't go through that thought process, and we're not always even aware that we have these biases and that they interpret or determine how we interact with people. So one of the things that I always ask facilitators or team leaders is, how do you, when you're in a collaborative setting, whether it's a meeting or a group or a Zoom call like this, if you're in a collaborative setting and you're working with a group of people, and we talked earlier, you guys have teams anywhere from 3 to 8 people, it looks like. How do you make sure that everybody's had a chance to give their opinion or say what they needed to say? And the number one answer that I get from people is, well, I give everybody a chance to talk because I go around the room and I call their names. So in the chat, if you've ever used that as a way, and there's no right or wrong answer here, in the chat, if you have used that as a way to make sure everybody got a chance to talk, type yes. If you've never done that, type no. So yes, I have used that as a method to get everyone's opinion, or no, I've never done that. And what drives us to do that is we think if we call on everybody, then we've given them that chance. We've made sure that they have an opportunity. We've made sure that they know we recognize they're in the room. But the reality is that could have the complete opposite effect of what you're trying to achieve. So let me give you an example. If you have someone on your team, and maybe you're that person who is very introverted or shy or quiet, and you suddenly call them out by saying their name, that person is not going to feel empowered to speak up. In fact, what they're probably wanting to do at that point in time is crawl under the table and try to be invisible, because that's even though if you do it all the time and they're used to it, it's a startling effect. And it's like, oh my gosh, they just said my name, and now I have to try and put my thoughts together, and I don't have my thoughts together, and I don't like to talk in front of people, and this is really, really uncomfortable for me. And so oftentimes, even if someone sat there the whole meeting and formulated ideas in their head or thoughts, when that point in time comes, when you call their name, they have nothing to say. And they'll say things like, I'm fine, no, that's okay, great, good, or mumble something that you can't even tell what they're saying because they're not comfortable speaking out. And now you put a spotlight on them. It's like they're on the center stage with a light on it because you said their name and everybody's looking at them because you said, hey, Bob, it's your chance to talk. So our best intentions of, I want to make sure I go around the room and call on everyone so that they know they have a chance to participate, may not give us the results that we want. So I want to think about that for a minute. So while we're doing that, I'm going to attempt to share a screen here with you guys. I'm going to put a link in the chat for a tool called Jamboard. Have you guys ever used Jamboard before? And again, I can't see you guys, so I can't have you all do thumbs up and thumbs down, but if you've used Jamboard, it's a good collaborative tool. It's free. It's part of the Google Suite. So I'm going to put a link in the chat. And what I want you to do is go to that link. And when you get there, you're going to see a bunch of little sticky notes with initials on it. Now, we do have 1 or 2 people with the same initials, so this could get interesting. And I put the initials in based on how you registered for the session. So if you typed one name and you use a different name, look for the one you registered under. And what I want you to do is I want you to take the sticky note that has your initials on it, and I want you to drag it into the target. And here's where I want you to drag it. I want you to drag it to the very, very center, to the bullseye. If every setting that you're in, every group engagement you're in, you always feel comfortable. You just go with the flow, you're fine, nothing rattles you, you're comfortable, easy, breezy, no problem. And if you are really, really uncomfortable with every single group setting and every social experience, then I want you to put your Post-it note over on the right-hand side off the target, because you are not comfortable at all with group settings and everything in between. So center of the target is, there's nothing that rattles me. I am super confident and comfortable with everything I do. Off the target, I'm never comfortable. I hate group interactions. It's the worst part of my day. So go ahead and take your Post-it note and drag it onto the target wherever you feel comfortable. Okay, awesome. So if you take a look at that target, you can see most of you are somewhere in the middle between everything's great and, oh my gosh, this is the worst, right? So everybody's somewhere in the middle, which means all of you have some experience when it comes to collaboration that is just not that great for you. It's just not that comfortable. So in the chat, I stopped sharing hopefully, in the chat, in just 3 to 5 words, we don't need paragraphs, just type an experience where you're not comfortable, where if you could opt out of it, you would. Maybe you're okay, but not great. Type some kind of a collaborative experience where it's just not your favorite thing to do. All right, so we have one person saying, big rooms of people I don't know. I'm right there with you. I absolutely hate going into big rooms of people I don't know. All right, anybody else? What situations? Expressing something when you disagree, right? When you have to kind of go against what everybody else is saying and you're like, oh great, I don't agree with this, but I don't really want to speak up. Handling conflicts, absolutely. And not many of us would give 2 thumbs up to, yay, conflict. This is awesome. I love being uncomfortable. You know, most of us don't. You know, we don't like conflict. We have different tolerances. Some people are much better able to handle it, and when it comes up, they address it. And other people really back off, and they're like, I will do everything humanly possible to avoid this. Speaking about things that I haven't mastered, right? So you may, sometimes even in your head, you're like, okay, I understand this. This is great. I think I've got this. But when you have to speak in front of a group of people, especially if they're your peers, and you might feel like somebody might know more than you do, then that could be an uncomfortable situation. Any context where there are more than 2 people I don't know. Yeah, so now you're in this situation where, okay, I don't know those people. I don't know how they're showing up for this interaction. I don't know what they're going to do or what they're going to say. And that can be very awkward or uncomfortable. People think that I am an extroverted person. And I understand why they might come up with that reasoning. I do talks like this. I've been asked to get up and talk in front of 200 people with 30 minutes notice, and I've done it without any problem. But the reality is that people interactions are exhausting for me. They really, really drain me. And when I had to go into an office every day, 8 to 10 hours of people, that is a lot of peopling. And I used to have to come home and take an hour nap just to recover from the fact that I had to be around people. And these were people I knew. They weren't strangers. But that interaction with people is really hard for me, and it drains all of my energy. So I have to have that time. Okay, so talking with people who don't listen, yeah, that's a big one. When I'm not fully present and feel like I might put a foot wrong. Yeah, you're like, okay, I'm just not myself today, but I'm expected to be myself, and I have to do what I'm supposed to do. So there are a lot of situations where we all feel uncomfortable. So what I want you to do in the future, when you're working with a group of people, if you're the facilitator or the leader, think about the fact that there are situations where you're not comfortable, which means every other person in that room has a situation where they're not comfortable. And I talked to someone, I'm constantly amazed by people who are in sales, because they seem like the people in the world who aren't afraid of anything. They will talk to anyone. They will tell them anything. They don't seem afraid of these interactions. And so I talked to a group one time. I said, is there anything you're afraid of? And you know what? They have things they're afraid of too. They're really good at what they do. But then other things, they're like, I don't understand what you do. I couldn't help somebody get through a conflict. I couldn't teach somebody how to interact with people. That would terrify me if I had to coach somebody. So everyone, even the people we think in our lives don't have any fears, have something that makes them really uncomfortable. So when we're working on interactions, and the next time we're thinking about how can we work with a group of people in a different way, think about everybody has some fear, and everybody has a time when they're really not comfortable showing up. So what I want to encourage you to do is think about, how do we make our team, or some of you may work on multiple teams, our team a more comfortable place to be. And I have 3 things, and anybody that's been to any of my talks knows I talk about these 3 things all the time because I feel so strongly about them being important. 3 things that every team needs to help people see where they fit into the team. And the first one is a team charter or a team canvas. Now, this is not a 20-page document. Nothing I ever recommend is a 20-page document, because I hate 20-page documents. It's a 1-pager. A canvas is 1 page. A charter can be 1 page. And it's, who are we as a team? What are our values? What is important to us? What is our purpose? Because believe it or not, some of the time, the reason people aren't comfortable in the team or in the interaction is because they don't really know what the purpose is. So they don't know how to show up. So having that conversation, even if you have a team that's been working together for years, I've worked with teams that have been together 3, 5, or longer years, and they couldn't really tell me what their true purpose was and what their values were as a team. So it doesn't hurt, even if you've worked together for a long time, to dial back, step back, and have that conversation. The second thing is a team work agreement. How do we want to work together? What's okay and what's not okay? Believe it or not, sometimes we actually have, or all the time, we have to state out loud, it's not okay for you to interrupt someone. That's not always obvious to everyone. So how do we want to work together? What do those interactions look like? And then the third thing, which is critical, especially right now with doing so much on video, is how are we going to communicate? I work remotely 99% of my time, even before all of the world events. So when the concept of Zoom fatigue or meeting fatigue came up, I was like, wait, what's happening right now? Like, I do this all the time. And then I realized I was getting tired too. So why was I getting tired doing something that I've always done? Well, the reality is other people's communication styles had changed. And suddenly everybody discovered there was this thing called Zoom. And every time you talk to somebody, they wanted to get on Zoom. Even for a 5-minute conversation, I'm like, can we not do that? I can just call you on the phone. So that communication plan is really important on how as a team do we want to communicate? When is it appropriate to use chat? When is it appropriate to use email? When is it appropriate to have a meeting? Not everything has to be a meeting. So those three things, the team charter or the team canvas, the team work agreement, and the communication plan go a long way in helping people show up better. And we do not have time to go into all three of those in detail because those are hours of conversations on their own. And I go through those in my 12-week journey about team collaboration. But I have all kinds of lives that are on replay and blogs about it. So you can look at those and I'll give you all the details at the end. But if you have a team that doesn't know how to talk together, which means they're really a group, not a team, how can you even help all of those things happen? And the way you can do that is with different facilitation techniques to help people get more comfortable. What does it look like to create that safe space? We need to do things differently. So, for example, I just did a talk about meetings with purpose because we have so many meetings. I've actually have a challenge right now if anybody wants to join. It's called the 50% meeting challenge. In 2 weeks, reduce all your meetings by 50%. So if anybody wants the challenge, see me on LinkedIn and I'll give you more details. But we're going to reduce our meetings by 50% and try to not have a meeting for everything. So that's one thing, is start reducing the number of interactions to the point where when you do have an interaction with somebody, they know it's important and they know it's impactful. And then come at those interactions differently. If you have a group of people and you're all on Zoom, you know, insist that everybody use video so you can see faces. You know, people say, well, I can't see expressions. I don't know how people are thinking. I don't know when somebody's fading out. Well, if you're on video, you sure can, you know. Then you teach people, look, let's use thumbs up and thumbs down. We don't have to unmute and talk every time somebody says, do you agree? Yeah, that's great. No, we can just do a thumbs up or a thumbs down and have a quick decision and move on. You use the chat like we've been doing. Use collaboration tools like the Jamboard that we just used or the Menti poll. But by doing those, you give people a different way to communicate. So when I had you all do the Jamboard, you didn't have to say a word. You just took your little person and you moved it across the board and you told me how you felt about that situation. And then I could use that to determine where the next part of the conversation went. You can even do that. And I put your initials on it so you all knew which Post-it note to grab, but you can do it without initials. You can just make all the little cards blue and everybody moves blue cards onto the target. You can make it anonymous, because if you're just trying to get a pulse for how the group as a whole is feeling and you don't particularly need to know how a specific person is feeling, make it anonymous. And then it's a bit safer for the people who aren't comfortable speaking up. I like to use anonymous tools quite a bit with groups when they're first struggling with communication until they get more comfortable working with each other. Because if somebody can be anonymous, they can still get their point out without putting a spotlight on themselves. So if you have consensus type things, use polls. Mentimeter's got all kinds of different things. That's just one of many, many, many tools that you can use. But use tools to get consensus or agreement that allow people to not have to talk and lets them get their ideas out. You can even do that when you want ideas. So let's say I want a whole bunch of ideas from people on what we should do about Fridays in the summer. And let's say you're the person who is afraid to say, can we just not work on Fridays? Because you're not sure that everybody else shares that opinion. So you're kind of afraid to say something that you think is radical and out there. But you can create you can use a wiki space, you can use, the Menti polls, all kinds of different collaborative tools for people to anonymously submit their ideas. And I'm using what we do with Fridays in summer just as a lightweight example, but you can use it for more important things. And everybody can anonymously submit their ideas. There are tools then where you can let people upvote. So, okay, on Monday, I'd like everybody to submit their ideas about summer Fridays. And on Tuesday, we're going to vote. And there are tools where you can give people multiple votes. I can have 3 votes. I can vote for my favorite 3, or I feel so strongly about not working at all on Fridays that I'm going to put all my votes on Friday on that one idea. And then you let people vote, and then you get the top 3 ideas. And now you can have a conversation and come up with an idea. So all of that back and forth that people are uncomfortable with, getting their idea out there, saying they agree or disagree, raising their hand, you can do all that behind the scenes. And oh, by the way, hey, we just reduced a meeting or 2 right there. You can do all of that behind the scenes and then just have the conversation when it gets really important. And I would even go so far as to say, you might let people opt out of the discussion. If they voted and they are aware of what the top 3 are, and they don't have an opinion about which one of those 3 is the one we go with, can they opt out? Can they just say, I'm fine with any of those 3, and whatever you guys decide is okay with me? Sure, why not? Does everybody have to be 200% into every single decision? No, sometimes they can be okay with passing. So you have to give that as an option as well. All right, so all of those things, I gave you a bunch of different ideas there, but start small. What you don't want is people to think, oh gosh, Mary just went to a workshop and look, now she's doing all these new ideas and she's changing all these things, and we've all been there. We all have been victims of the person who went to a workshop and came back and tried to implement all 20 ideas in the first week in some haphazard random fashion. Go slowly. Start small. Start with things like voting and, anonymous ideas. Do small things. Don't try to radically change everything at once, because that will be as disconcerting as the uncomfortable feeling they have with communicating. I'm going to teach you one of the techniques that you can use for people to get them talking. And this is from something called Liberating Structures. And you can go to their website, and there are 33 different ones that you can use with different levels of complexity, but they're all about communication. The website is liberatingstructures.com. Here, in fact, let me put that in the chat so that you have it if you save this. And I'll even try to do it without a typo. There we go, liberatingstructures.com. And the website is actually pretty well set up because they have them all in a grid, and you can just click on the different ones and it shows you how to set it up and use it and gives you ideas. But one of the easiest ones to use that you can implement just based on what I'm about to tell you, and we're going to try it, is called 1, 2, 4, all. So the number 1, the number 2, the number 4, the word all. And here's how it works. You have something that you want people to think about, and you ask them to think about it independently. Now, this is a good tool to make sure people have a voice, because most of us are okay with doing work on our own, right? We can sit and think of our ideas that nobody's ever going to see. We can cross them out, write them, do them on our phone, do them on our computer. So you start out by giving people a chance to come up with their own ideas. Then you put two people together to talk, because it's easier to talk. I think somebody in our group said, if there are more than two people I don't know, I feel uncomfortable. Well, one-on-one, that means one person. So you may not know that person really well, but if they're on your team, you are at least used to working with them. So the two of you talk about it. Then you expand and you go to 4. So you've got the 2 and the 2. So these two have already talked together and these two have already talked together, and you put them together. Well, now you've got a bond, because you two have bonded and you two have bonded. So it's not scary. It's not 4 strangers, right? And then oftentimes what I do is I will have a request that someone in that group of 4 be the note taker, the compiler of information. And then when we all come back as a group, I don't ask that person to make a speech. I ask them to put the ideas from the team in a collaborative space and just type the ideas in. I have seen other people do this where they want someone to be the voice of the group. Well, what if all 4 people in the group don't like to speak in front of a bigger audience? Now you've put somebody under pressure to have to make a speech, but you didn't give them any time to prepare the speech because you've just done the session. So this is what we're going to do. I want you for just 1 minute in your own space to write down ways that you may have unintentionally, or maybe it was intentional, excluded someone in the team, in a team setting. Ways that you may have unintentionally excluded someone. So I am now going to randomly put you into breakout rooms. Now, the beauty of using breakout rooms in Zoom is what you talk about in the breakout rooms is not recorded. So there's already some safety in those breakout rooms because you can talk about whatever you want. If you choose to not do the assignment, you can do that because I'm not there watching you and other people are not in the room with you and we're not recording it. So that's another layer of safety. If you do this in person, give people the ability to be on their own. Don't stand over them and listen to the conversation. So 3 minutes for you to talk in pairs, and there'll be one group with 3 people about ways that you may have unintentionally not made a group setting a nice place for people to participate. All right, so let's talk about those ideas. We're going to go into the rooms now, and I'll see you back here in 3 minutes. Groups for this next part. I'm going to split you guys and have you go into the other groups. So now what you're going to do is you're going to go into your group of 4. The other group has 3 in it, and you're going to compare your ideas. And I would like somebody to be the note taker in each group to capture the ideas. And I'm going to put a broadcast message in the breakout room while you're there of where I want the note taker to record the ideas. So again, we're going to have 3 minutes. And then we'll come back, and when you come back, I would like those ideas to have been captured on the link that I gave you. All right, anybody have any questions on what we're doing? If not, all right, here we go. All right, so it looks like we have everybody back. And some of the things that we came up with was, let me get my list here. Not acknowledging or addressing someone who hadn't participated. So maybe somebody was fading to the background a bit and we just didn't take that into account. Using expert vocabulary. That is a big one. If everyone in the group isn't working off of the same words and the same vocabulary, then sometimes we can talk over people by not making sure we level out the vocabulary or make sure they know what the vocabulary is. Speaking about things that we were interested in while people might not be so into it. Yeah, sometimes we get in our own little world. Private jokes, yeah. And there's a time for that. It's not that we need to suddenly become little soldiers and not have any creativity or fun things or say things, but make sure that you're not excluding everybody in the room by saying something that nobody understands but the one person. Not addressing someone when facilitating a training session, kind of ignoring somebody. You're like, oh, well, they don't seem to be engaged, so I'm just not going to call on them anyway. High pressure scenario when everyone wants to get something done, but the loudest voice dominates and it's not creating opportunities for others. Yeah, and that happens quite often, especially with bigger groups. I tend to watch out, especially if I have a group where I have more senior people and more junior people. Oftentimes the junior people will not speak up because they kind of wait for the senior people to say, and then they think, well, okay, they said that, so I have to agree with it. So I really watch in those scenarios if somebody's talking over or trying to be the expert and not giving everyone else a chance. Because, you know, some of our best ideas come from people with the least amount of experience, right? Because they have a whole different perspective on the world and what's happening. So that's a big one. Watch out for those people dominating. And not handling a controversial team member. Yeah. So back to that thing where somebody said they didn't like conflict. Yeah. And if you don't like conflict and then you have somebody who's constantly being a problem, then you, as the person who doesn't like conflict, you have to go deal with that and you don't want to deal with it. So you keep putting it off, but then the pressure's growing for the entire group. So, you know, handle things when they come up. So in the chat, just type yes or no. Do you think this is a kind of collaboration technique that you could use in some of your interactions where you kind of build, you know, and give people the chance to talk in smaller groups and then you build up to bigger groups? So type in the chat, is this something that you would try working with people? Or maybe you've already done it. Yeah, so this is an easy one to facilitate. It's not like people are gonna be like, what is she doing? We're doing these weird things all the time. This one's pretty easy because it's you know, not a big, there's no wow factor to it. You're just having people, oh, we're gonna break this up in groups so that we can talk about it. Yeah, if you have a small group already, then it's difficult to say, oh, we'll have small groups and then we'll have the big group because you don't have a big group. But it could be a technique that you can use when you're working with the larger association membership, the larger community, and you want to have discussions and talking points. So yeah, so if you're a small group, this one's, you know, definitely not. But you can do the smaller part of it, which is give everybody a chance to get their own ideas together first, and then talk it through and come up with it and do what you want with it. All right, so a couple things just as we wrap up here to keep in mind when we're including people. And remember, I use the example because it's one that people can understand no matter where they're coming from. So I use the example of an introverted or a shy person during this talk intentionally, but there are all kinds of biases that creep into collaborative settings. So just be mindful of that when you're interacting with people. I have seen women excluded from opportunities because they were pregnant and they're like, well, they're going to go on maternity leave, so why should we give them a chance to speak up? They're not going to be here. You know, there are all kinds of things that creep into our world without us realizing it. And so all of these things, if we create a space where everyone always has a chance to participate and collaborate, then we don't have to worry about those biases. Okay, so don't make everything a verbal engagement. That's my first tip to wrap this up. Alternate. That doesn't mean shift everything over to anonymous voting and polling. Don't go the other way. Happy medium. Use conversation, use anonymous polling and voting, use, you know, facilitation techniques, keep it alternating and give everybody a chance to find where they're comfortable, and then reuse the ones that really work. You know, ask people, hey, did you guys like doing thumbs up instead of everybody having to talk? Or did you like doing the voting instead of having to have a meeting? By the way, no one has ever told me they'd rather have a meeting than do voting buttons. Nobody has ever said that. Nobody has ever said, yes, let's have a meeting for an hour to talk about something we could have just answered in a voting. You know, so think about that. Don't make everything a verbal engagement. Only bring people together who need to be together. So a lot of times in corporate settings, especially, we get this thing where we start inviting all these people so we have situational awareness and coverage. Don't invite the world if the world is not part of the conversation. Only have people who need to be part of the conversation. Reduce meetings. We talked about my 50% meeting reduction challenge. Reduce, 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 so that when you do have meetings or collaborative settings, people realize it's for a reason. It's not just, oh, let's have another meeting. Great. Consider all the different styles in your group. If you're the facilitator, you've learned who talks up, who doesn't, who's late, who's on time. You learn all of these things. So think about that when you're planning. And then finally, create smaller collaborative spaces and ways for people to work together. One of my teams came up with this thing called Power Hour, and they would invite each other to work together. So they learned in a technical space, they were trying to learn what each other knew and what they were doing, and they were trying to give opportunities for junior staff to learn more senior techniques. So they would do these things called Power Hour. Another group I know did it because one person was a subject matter expert and one person was a technical expert. And they discovered that they were spending all day, each of them, trying to solve two different problems, where if they had just gotten together for a power hour, they were able to solve both problems in under an hour. So they each spent 8 hours, that's 16 hours on two problems that never got solved. And when they got together, they solved them in an hour. So those collaborative power hours are also a good technique to use. All right, we are just about out of time. I did not see any questions on the Menti, but if you do have, I can take one or two questions now. If you do have questions that you want me to answer, go ahead and type those in the chat. And again, if I don't get to answer them now because we're about out of time, I will provide answers. I'm going to do a post in LinkedIn so you can connect with me there, and I'll do a little recap of what we talked about, and I'll answer the questions there as well. Or you can send me a direct message if you don't feel comfortable asking in the group. And while you're thinking of that, I'm going to give you two different ways that you can connect up with me if you want to talk further. I do 4 sessions per week for free, 30-minute consultations with people to try to help them get unstuck where they are with their team collaboration. So here's the link for that. If you feel like you want some one-on-one help with trying to get unstuck with where you are. And then the other thing that I'm going to give you in a link, we do a 12-week program where this topic that we covered today is just a blip of everything that we talk about. So all those things I mentioned earlier about the team agreements and communication plans, we go through all of that in detail. We help you put one together. We do facilitation techniques. We go deep dive into liberating structures. We talk about conflict, personality styles. So it's 12 weeks of just a few hours each week getting together and then doing group coaching. So you can explore that as well. And again, schedule a time on my calendar if you want to talk about that too, because like, it sounds cool, but I don't really know. So like I said, I do 4 free sessions a week for first come, first serve, for people who need help. I am on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I'm all over the place doing lives. So please check that if you have questions. And like I said, send me a message if you're not sure that you want to post your question in public, and I will help you. But thank you everybody for coming today. And I look forward to working with 50 in Tech again in the future on more things. So everybody have a great day, great rest of your week, and I'll hopefully talk to you soon. All right, bye everybody.